Hey, Pastor, your sermons are not deep enough, you're not funny enough, and your sermons are going way too long.
Hey, Pastor, sing more hymns. It's too loud.
Hey, I'm leaving the church, but don't take it personal.
My favorite is, listen, Pastor, some people are saying, but it's never some people. It's you. It's always just that single person.
I once had someone tell me my sermon was fine, but apparently my arms made them stumble.
Okay, humble brag.
Welcome back to Practically Pastoring. Today's episode, we're talking about the feedback we need to hear, the criticism we shouldn't be hearing, and how to distinguish between both of them. Welcome back.
Preach on, brother.
Welcome back to Practically Pastoring, the podcast for pastors who love the local church but are tired of feeling like they're doing it alone. My name is Frank, and I'm joined here with Andrew, Tim, Jeff, and Delmar. And today we're talking about one of the most universal problems in ministry for pastors, and that is getting feedback that is sometimes helpful, sometimes hurtful, and sometimes hilarious. And the thing is, sometimes it's difficult to figure out how we're going to distinguish between both of them. So what I would love for us to do real quick is to kind of go around the horn and hear from you guys of different feedback that you've gotten. And like, what's the wildest things people have said to you?
Well, I actually brought a letter because I was at a church in Orlando, and we decided we were there because the church was struggling and there was no young people. And so myself and another associate pastor put together a plan to have the young adult small group, which we had newly formed, make like a welcoming table for Easter Sunday, because it was going to be big. And so we had an old school greeter there at that church, and his name will remain unsaid, but he didn't like anything that anybody ever did. He was grouchy, and I don't know why he was a greeter, because he would force people to wear name tags that were new, and you know how nice that is. So on Easter Sunday, we created a coffee bar in the church's lobby area, or narthex, if you will. And needless to say, George was not happy about it. The next morning, on Monday, the day after Easter, there were letters under everybody's office door, and it also had been delivered to the district office of our denomination, which just so happened to be like 5 minutes down the street. And let me just read you at least the beginning of this, just really helpful feedback, Here's what it says. Pastoral staff and church board. I was personally very disappointed when I entered the church sanctuary this morning, first by turning the sanctuary's narthex into a satanically decorated deli. Now, first of all...
What? It's kind of hilarious.
First of all, we didn't have any meats or cheeses, so I don't know how it was a deli. Maybe bakery, but
Was
anyway.
there a bagel?
And the arrogant disregard for the municipal fire code that prohibits blocking of fire exits. We didn't block any fire exits. If this is the first impression that you want to convey to visitors, then I no longer wish to be associated with your modern, immature, throwaway concept of the Lord's house. I have spent decades teaching young people to respect, care for, and never defile, deface, mar, or soil the Lord's house. This was always including not bringing food or drink into the sanctuary or its narthex. I have tolerated the contemptible disregard leadership has shown concerning the band playing too loud and the speaker's microphones being off or muted. I would remind you that our Lord spoke to 5,000 outdoors without the advantage of an acoustically constructed sanctuary. His words were heard well enough to be recorded for us. Well, because his disciples were sitting at his feet. For many years, there was only one microphone permanently mounted on the pulpit you now use as a bar in your deli, and two microphones suspended above the choir. These microphones were necessary as our Sunday morning service was broadcast on local radio. They didn't have that in the Bible either. Anyway, many persons heard the in-depth verse-by-verse Bible messages, choir and congregational singing of hymns and piano and organ music, and came to become part of the 800-plus congregation. During those many years, we heard all that the speakers said because we had not first been deafened by amplified musical instruments. I am sorry for what has become of a once proud beacon of the Lord's light that drew many to the Lord through expository preaching of the Bible and congregational singing of the hymns of the faith. Disappointedly, and he signed his name. That was maybe the most wild feedback I ever got, just because of the time it took for him to do that. It was pretty incredible.
That he called it the Devil's Deli? Is that what he said?
Satanically decorated deli. And I
read
my
pentagrams on it. I'm guessing.
There were
Did you have like Molech above it?
There were no meats, there were no cheeses, there were no olives. Nothing about it was a deli. You might be able to say a satanic bakery.
Was it satanic?
There were bagels. I mean, I didn't think it was satanic
First of
to
all,
have coffee and bagels.
Bagels are not baked. Come on, they're boiled.
Wow.
Well, then they're toasted.
Yes,
Delmar,
but they're not baked.
Tell me a story about what you've heard. That's
Yeah.
a crazy one, Jeff.
Yeah,
I
top
don't know
that.
if anyone's going to top it, but we actually had one just recently in the last couple of weeks. Had a couple want to meet with myself, the lead pastor, and some elders at their house, to which they brought up they framed it as concerns that because we sang Elevation, that we were becoming a prosperity gospel church, and this was a big concern because we sang this song, and in the same meeting accused us of being too reformed in our theology in the same meeting. So we're like, we don't even know where to put that, and they ended up leaving over this. So it's like, okay.
So which end of the spectrum were you mad at?
Both, I guess.
So I have one that's a little bit different. This is maybe about 2 years ago. I had a lady in her 80s, and she's a wonderful, sweet lady. She'll kind of pop in for 3 or 4 months at a time, then disappear for 2 years, and then pop back. And she has always just really, really liked me, doesn't really care for contemporary music. But she came up to me after church, very, very concerned, and said, Andrew, those jeans that you are wearing, they're
Too
just
tight.
They're just not very doctoral. Her exact words. She's a PhD, and I had just finished, and she handed me a check for $1,000.
Your current jeans are very doctoral.
Oh, thank you. And she said, you need to get a more professional looking wardrobe if you are going to be representing the church.
Can I get me some of that feedback, please?
So she
I would
handed
love
me $1,000 check and sent me to the outlet mall.
Jesus is watching.
And so then for like the next 3 weeks, I was like, huh? How do you feel about the outfit?
Is that when you started wearing a tie every week?
No, I've worn a tie every week since I started here.
Wow.
There was no issue with the tie. It was just the lower half that she had issue with.
Wow.
Eyes up, ma'am. Wow.
And I was sitting down, so I'm very confused by all of it.
Sheesh. I was told by a former elder, and mind you, we were going through the process of me becoming the new lead pastor at Lakeview. There were lots of things happening during this time, but I had a former elder call me after I left the church. It was a Sunday. He said, Tim, we need to meet right now. And I said, I've already left with my family. He goes, well, can you turn around? This is like Sunday afterwards. And I was like, okay. So I turned around, made it back to the church in a few minutes. He said, Tim, we need to talk about something. I was like, okay. He said, if you are going to make it as the next lead pastor here at Lakeview, you need to prove to me and to everyone else that you can do this without your dad by your side. And I was like, what are you saying? He goes, I want you to call your dad, and I want you to tell him he's no longer allowed to be at Lakeview.
Your dad, who's been a member of the church longer than he's been an elder.
It was the wildest interaction. I don't even know that I responded. I just knew that there was no shot. Like, I don't know what he meant by me having to prove myself without my dad nearby. Needless to say, a week later, I was elected as the new lead pastor, and a week and a half after that, he resigned and left the church.
Well, not all feedback is
See ya.
Obvious. Yeah, seriously. Sometimes feedback is a gift. Sometimes it's helpful and useful, and sometimes it can be really, really hurtful. Dr. Andrew, can you help us with your doctor jeans that you're currently wearing? Help us to.
They're from the Gap factory outlet. They're the super soft.
Help us to triage this. How can we take feedback and understand how to frame it?
I think when you are, first of all, no one is like, hey, we're going to have a feedback meeting, so you show up prepared. Most of the feedback that we get is a letter under our door or a phone call right after church on a Sunday. So it's not like we are ever like really prepared to get it. So I think number one is take a step back and then try to, figure out which file it's going to go in. Is this going to be helpful? Is it, feedback that's legitimately going to make you better? Hey, here's something that if you paused at this point in your sermons or whatever it was, is it something that is actually helpful, constructive, honest, given in love, and will actually make you better? So that's tier one feedback. We like that. And then there's just misinformed feedback. It's annoying, but it's harmless. It's, kind of rooted in someone's preferences, whether about music or bagels or whatever it may be. But there's some kind of a misunderstanding, and it's not going to hurt anybody. And sometimes as the pastor, we think that we are supposed to, maturity isn't always tied to age. And sometimes a lot of this feedback comes from older members of the congregation. And sometimes the mature thing to do is sit there and take it on the chin because it's not hurting anybody, and you can nod and listen and they will feel heard. But then there's the harmful feedback, whether it's toxic or unhealthy. the feedback that can be cruel, manipulative, or very, very agenda driven. And that's the kind of feedback that you kind of need to put your foot down. I'm like, no, this is not who we are as a church. This is not where we are theologically. This is not the way that we're going to be represented in our community. And that's the kind of feedback that we have to kind of head off before it gets out of hand.
Well, like Andrew, help start us off here. Help us understand, like, when it comes to like helpful feedback, how can we know when to accept that?
So one of the first times I was preaching on a regular basis, I had the senior pastor at the church I served at previously. His health was failing, so I was preaching about 40% of the time, and it was ramping up more than that. And in between services, he said, Andrew, you're doing a great job. However, I think, there was like a specific illustration that was pretty funny that landed at about the 70% mark in the sermon. And it was, I think you would gain everything that you gained from that at the beginning of the sermon, and you wouldn't lose the momentum. He was like, just trust me on this. He's like, you don't have to like make that shift for next service, but this is just, and he had been a professor and all this. And so I thought, okay. And so the next service was the more traditional service with the older congregation. And I went to the office in between and made a copy and paste in my manuscript, and I moved the entire like paragraph section, and he was absolutely right. It landed better at the beginning, and there was no momentum shift at the end. And so for that one, I was like, oh, okay, absolutely. That was helpful. It was given in love. And that's, kind of still ambushed because it was in between services, but he was exactly right.
Jeff, what do you have an example of like helpful feedback?
When I was younger, very young, when I was first starting to lead worship in like big church, it had been a year or two. There's an older guy at my church, and I will use his name because it's positive, Jim. Older guy named Jim, and him and his wife were super sweet, and they were retired, and he kind of became like an extra grandfather almost. Like he just took me under his wing and was always checking on me and was super sweet. And one day he came to me after I'd been leading worship for a while, and he just put his arm around me. It was after a service, but it wasn't like right after. It was kind of like everybody had gone home, and he kind of like, we were getting ready to go to lunch, whatever. And he put his arm around me and just said, hey, for some of us, it's just really distracting when you wear sandals while you're leading worship. And like, and
see your toes.
Yeah, basically and back then I was wearing like, the leather rainbow, like thong sandals that everybody wore back then with
I still love me some rainbow sandals.
They're great. Oh. I wear Birkenstocks now because my knees need that. But anyway, and I was wearing, jeans with it that were a little ripped on the bottom, and like, it was doing the whole thing. And so he just said, that it's just like something that just is so distracting. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind just like wearing shoes. And, I was probably pretty defensive at first, but based on the relationship that he gave me, I realized like I'm not just leading worship for people that are my age, because I'm like leading worship in big church, quote unquote. It's not youth group anymore. And there's a big wide range. And so like, basically why not just put on shoes? Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. So that was pretty helpful for me. And I think what it did is it planted a seed that has been with me ever since of like, you have to think, especially now as a senior pastor, you have to think of everybody that's part of your church and not just like the demographic that you most like associate with. So, there's people that are now, I'm in a place where there's people that are decades younger than me as adults and decades older than me as adults. And like, you kind of have to keep in mind both of them. You can't just cater everything to kind of like your preferences. And that was actually pretty helpful.
I was talking to a church planner recently, and he said something like, I really hope I can get old people to give money to my church, but not come to the church.
Frank,
and I was like, dude, I don't think he's going to make it. It's a conversation I had this morning with Frank that he's probably going to edit out of this conversation.
I'm not going to edit it out,
but he was joking.
Not exactly
he was joking.
That was
that was very very close to what you said.
Crazy out of context. Hey, Delmar, can you give me a good thing before we go into misinformed?
Yeah, when I was starting to preach in the main service more, there's this older lady in church. She's real sweet as well. And she came up to me and she says, hey, I know you speak to students all the time and you got to like keep their attention. She goes, but us older people have hearing aids and sometimes we can't hear as fast as you talk. So can you please like slow down just a little bit? So what I did, I went in my sermon and I actually wrote the word pause on the front end, like in my intro, and during each point I would pause. And long term, it actually improved my entire preaching style. But even then, she came back and closed the loop and was like, "We've noticed that you've been trying, and thank you." And it was a small change, but I actually think that it affected my preaching in a good way.
Okay. Second bucket, misinformed. So this is kind of the stuff where it's more about preferences, misunderstanding.
Del, when I hear, I mean, both of you and Andrew said something about like a preaching feedback. That stuff is actually like, the reality is you have a context that you're preaching to. And I think like whenever you get feedback like that, that's almost rarely bad or misinformed. There could be misinformed stuff there, but like if it's like actual like technique, like your structure, the speed in which you speak, the illustration types you use, those are almost always helpful. I have found that in this bucket where I have engaged people that give often misinformed information is almost always, at least for me, is always in the context of worship. And so at my last church, there was two things that we would often get feedback in, and it's always so like nuanced. So one is always the loudness of the music, and that is such a like a preference thing. Now there can absolutely be like if you're pumping 120 dBs in a small room, like turn it down. But like there's also reality, like if you have an acoustic drum set, you're going to have to make some decisions.
And if you have an electric drum set, God hates you.
Unless you have an electric acoustic drum set.
Yeah. Anyways, way to bring.
I don't think God actually hates. I just think the early 2000s sound of the drumstick hitting the pad.
Yeah, they don't sound like that.
Yeah,
anymore.
Well,
there have been many advancements.
Boy, there were some really bad ones. And let's be real, most churches have someone's hand-me-down gear from 12 years ago.
For sure.
Andrew, you're older millennial showing, bro.
I'm so old. I'm a geriatric millennial.
When people are talking about it's too loud, and like I feel bad because like a lot of larger churches, what they'll do is they'll offer earplugs, and that like looks weird, but like it actually is like I think churches are just doing their best when it comes to sound treatment because it's not that simple of just turning down the audio and for it to still sound good. The other side of this that Delmar mentioned that we've actually dealt with more recently, but I dealt with my last church, is the churches or the worship groups that write the music that we're singing, people giving critical feedback of like, oh, you know their theology is bad, or they're this, or they're that, or did you know the person that wrote that is this kind of person?
They don't really have cancer.
But like my thing about when it comes to like whether you're talking about Elevation or you're talking about Maverick City or you're talking about Bethel is like
Hillsong.
Is his back really broken?
Shout to the Lord is so bad.
Why? Because it's
written by Hillsong. It's evil.
Yeah. The issue is that and maybe like we in this group are privileged to know this, and most people don't know this, but like the way songwriting works is not as simple as this person with bad theology wrote a song and they put it out there. Like sometimes like certain churches will get a songwriter who doesn't even go to their church to help write the song, and that songwriter is like a good songwriter that has good theology, but that church that you don't like bought the rights to it and then they put it out. It's also, Chris Thomas has proved this, so many songs that come out have actually been written by another church that you don't even know about. And again, they just got the rights to it and they made it popular.
And you're trying to get a song that people can sing, and the songs that people know and can sing are the ones that are probably on the radio.
As long as Shane and Shane has covered it, you're fine. Just tell them it's the Shane. Say it's
we
the
tried that,
Shane
it didn't work,
and they're fine.
That's actually a really good rule.
Shane and Shane,
Del, you tried. That's our rule.
Shane and Shane
we tried that with. We tried that with this recent copy, and they said, well, we traced it, and Shane got it from Elevation. Yeah,
we traced it.
Wow. We traced it.
CCLI Detectives, the worst CSI spinoff ever.
Oh, hold on. I'll tell you how the feedback went. The feedback said, we sang this one song that was once sang by Bethel, and since we have a CCLI license, we're cutting Bethel a check, so we're funding witchcraft.
Well, okay, great.
Hold on, back to Andrew's show idea. All of them start with Andrew taking his glasses off and looking sideways at the camera. But then it doesn't cut to the song of CSI Miami. It cuts to some worship song.
Yeah, it cuts to Marvelous Light.
Like, wait, is this heresy? And then Chris Tomlin's Arriving starts playing in the background.
Yes.
Oh, it'll be so good.
Okay. So Jeff, since you're probably more of an expert than any of us on this about this.
Nope.
CCLI. Also, you write you get a subscription to CCLI, and it's not per song. It's just the access to the library of CCLI, right? So
Right.
if you get subscription to CCLI, if
You're funding witchcraft no matter
if
what.
there's a witch on CCLI, they're getting that money no matter what. Like to be able to go through, we're either gonna have to go back to only doing hymns, which even
Wait.
that
What to say?
Yeah.
They're bar tunes, yo.
Then
Don't
we
you
have
sing bar
slave
tunes in
traders
church?
and anti-Semites. And
Yes.
we've got
so
real jerks there.
So this is why when it comes to this conversation, I almost be like, this church might not be for you, because like I don't know how to.
I mean,
engage
it
this
sounds like
conversation.
Delmar is having trouble making disciples. You know what I mean?
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think-
Out
discipleship
of the
issue.
hundreds at his church have an issue, so it's definitely Delmar. You know.
It
Yeah.
must be.
Yeah. But I mean, I try to point to the
But-
fact.
The reality is,
Right.
it is a discipleship issue, and it's not a critique of the church. It's a critique of these might be people who are choosing to not be willing to be discipled.
Yeah.
They're walking in foolishness and not wisdom. When you can come back and say, "Hey, but think about these reasonable things, and think about this reality, and here's something to think about," and they just go basically, "La la la, I don't want to hear it. I don't like this." It's a quote. It's a quote I love to say, but like a mature Christian is easily edified. It's like if you're immature, then you think everything is supposed to be pleasing to you, and that is, that's just the air we breathe in our culture. So when you see that playing itself out like this, people will dress it up in the trappings of spiritual stuff, but it's literally just pride and me being at the center of my preferences. I don't like elevation for whatever reason. I don't want anything to do with it. I mean, so just don't sing it when you're in church. Like, just don't sing that part.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I will say it's a discipleship issue and it's a sanctification issue, because we are discipling them. We're telling them the truth. I even said, you're not applying that purity through every area of your life. You showed up here in your Target clothes with a Starbucks in your hand, So it's a sanctification issue. And I can't do that. That's work between you and God. We can disciple you all day long, but if you're not going to grow in that, then what you said is true. This probably in the church for you.
I try to encourage people to take the actual song, for what it is. Are these lyrics true? Are these lyrics pointing to glorifying God? If they're not, like I remember in Bible college, I would say that like there's like two songs I really, really don't like. And I know I was nitpicking, but I also felt like those lyrics were not pointing to like biblical truth. I felt like they were just kind of like meandering around this like perhaps heretical idea. Those are
Name
valid
the songs.
Those are valid
Name the
conversations.
songs.
He was trampled on like a rose, but Jesus thought of him above all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Above All is the song. One of the songs I'm always like,
It's
I'm
the
not
worst.
comfortable.
It's not even that good of a song anyway.
It's not, Jeff. I agree. It's not
It's
that
like
good.
that's the other side of this. Like, to play the devil's advocate the other way is like there's other songs. If there's
Right.
really a song that's like an issue and it becomes just like cut it and do a different song. Like, don't make an idol out of a certain song either. You know what I mean? Like, you're free to just be like, oh well, I guess we won't do that song anymore.
But
Yeah.
Jesus definitely did not think of me above all.
Yeah, but Jeff, to your point, there was that song. Was it by Hillsong where it had the song like "So Will I"? It was by "So Will I." That song.
Oh, yeah.
And in there, there's a line that says something about evolving or evolution or whatever. And like in the context of the lyric, it makes sense. And like it's not about like supporting evolution. You
But
would have thought
social evolution or personal growth.
you would have thought that we had the Devil's Deli on our stage, because people were so mad at the fact that we had that song. And to just point, it's like, we don't have to sing the song. Like it's a beautiful song, and I think it's actually a really like nice song, but like we also didn't have to do it, and it wasn't worth the trouble.
Thankfully, we live in a time when we have thousands of songs to choose from, which is also a burden and also like a black hole of attention if you let it be. But like, you just don't have to.
I think so much of this is like what we were saying before, the discipleship issue. What you have people, not only do we have so many songs to choose from, we have so many churches to choose from, and people that, especially the people that are giving us this specific type of feedback. It's not necessarily heretical and they're not trying to cause division, but it's people that are trying to create a church in their own image, and they don't want to be pastored because they know that they can go someplace down the street and find another church that's not going to sing those songs, or they're going to find a church that's going to have whatever that specific program for their specific life stage is. And so it is a discipleship and a sanctification issue. But we have people who don't want to be pastored, and as pastors, there's nothing we can do when it comes to that. It's kind of like hey, this is a thank you, God be with you, and we're going to agree to disagree on this one.
I think the misinformed bucket can also be like a culture thing where maybe they just grew up in a particular setting where, hey, they did do an altar call every Sunday, and now we don't do an altar call every Sunday. Again, it's annoying. I think the feedback is harmless. We can still listen to them. We can still love them and care for them. Or the guy that loves sending me the latest Brady Shear podcast on this is why we only do so many announcements or something. I get the podcast like that all the time. I'm like,
I think it'd be interesting too to like tie this back to kind of our last episode where we talked about the vision drip whole thing. And like part of this is coming, part of these kind of feedback, this kind of feedback is coming, especially when it comes to music and stuff, is a difference of opinion or a lack of understanding / no one really talks about why does the Sunday gathering exist? Like, what's the point of it? Yeah. And, you know, if you think the point of it is to make you feel good or to attract new people, you're going to have a certain idea about what we're supposed to do and the kinds of songs we're going to sing. And is the sermon too long or not long enough? I mean, my example of this was somebody once told me that we were doing too many scripture readings and so that means we don't have enough time for announcements, which sounds bonkers to me. But that's because I was approaching it from a different perspective of why the Sunday gathering existed as a worship leader. In my mind, the Sunday gathering was like the high point of discipleship. It was like this moment of communal discipleship. And so announcements are okay, but they're not like a big deal. Whereas that person was kind of coming more at it from like, this is about welcoming visitors and letting them know what's going on in our church. And so, you know, a lot of times this misinformed feedback can come from that place of like having a different idea about what the thing is you're critiquing is for. And so that's why it is really important to continually talk about, this is why we're doing this is why we exist, here's why we do the things we do on a Sunday morning or a Thursday night or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're not going to win any of those arguments. So sometimes smile and nod politely and let people have differing opinions.
Hey, Jeff, let's transition into the harmful bucket. Jeff, can you give us an example of harmful feedback that we could receive?
Yeah, I was in the Satanic Deli church, and they, you know, one thing I've noticed, and I think Andrew touched on this earlier, but almost always, if somebody starts a critique with, well, this isn't personal, it's usually pretty unhelpful critique, because the reality is being a pastor is personal. If it wasn't personal for us, we would not be good shepherds, good pastors. We care about people on a personal level. That's why in Delmar's case, it hurts when they leave for really kind of ridiculous reasons, because it feels like a relational break, because on one level it is. But we were in a situation where I was a part of an interim team that was maybe going to become the lead, team at the end. And there was disagreement in the leadership among the elder board. I mean, this was a church where we had 6 and 8 hour long elder meetings, which tells you the health level, not good. And so I had elders telling me, hey, if you would just, one thing you could try is you could start your own small group and get people to follow you. And then that way, you would have a group of people who wanted to follow your leadership. And then that would make a good argument. And I was like, this is terrible advice. Like you're basically telling me to start a coup, an underground movement in a church, which is super divisive. And like, why would I do this? And that was their, I would say, toxic sort of like feedback of what I should do. And they were trying to manipulate a situation. And what I knew, which if you're younger, you need to know this, if they're telling you to do something like that, there's going to come a day when they're going to do it against you too. Or they're going to do it in a way that is, in the opposite direction of what you want to go. As soon as you start offering church discipline to them, or as soon as you start correcting that person, they're going to turn around and do that same kind of thing to you and not with you.
What you just said kind of brought something to my attention, because one thing I've noticed, and I would consider this as a red flag of how do you know if harmful, toxic feedback is happening in the church, it's what's called factionalism. It's a new word I just learned recently. Faction, like I know you've heard of gossip, and sometimes gossip is just talking to bring someone down. Factionalism is talking with others for the point of basically creating a group of people within the people to take over the people. And the way you know that factionalism is going on is if you hear phrases like, people have been talking, or someone has told me, because these shadow meetings is what you would call them. Like, they're literally the only reason somebody would say people have been talking is a power move over you. And that is not for construction. That is always to tear you down. So I would say for me, that's my biggest red flag that this is unhealthy, is when I hear that there are a group of people in the church who've been talking, or you got the person who say people been talking. We traced that back this week. Somebody came and said, people been talking. And well, we said, who is the person? And they're like, well, we're not going to tell you. Well, that person is mature enough to know they were getting sucked into this. So they came and self-reported themselves. They said, listen, so-and-so brought this situation to me, and I just listened to it, and now they think we're on their side. So people haven't been talking. Like, a couple, they're trying to talk. So I think that's real important when it comes to this harmful, because one of the things that can happen with harmful criticism is it can spiral and start getting into your whole church if you do not do church discipline. Like, this is how you handle harmful criticism. We had to go to their house. It was a church discipline, and we had to basically go to Titus, where you warn them one time if they're causing division, right? They get one warning. This is not Matthew 18. This is Titus. You're causing division. The second time, you're out. And chances are, if they're causing this and they don't have a repentant heart, one warning is all it's going to take, right? That's been my experience.
To me, this is grounds for almost immediate dismissal if you've got an elder or a deacon doing this kind of stuff. It's literally a qualification to be an elder and a pastor.
Yes.
So if you're a pastor and you're listening to this and you find in yourself this temptation towards, I want to build a group of people around me, like, understand that it's disqualifying character in you. And if you see that if you go into a job interview and you can see that there are factions among the elders, run. You don't want to be part of that. It is like, elders are not supposed to be quarrelsome, and that is what this is. Looking for fights, looking for, division and factions and power. Like, that's not supposed to be part of how leadership works in the church.
And also, in that same vein, flow in the opposite direction. If your elders are unified, that is one of the best defenses against this, because we showed up at their house, 4 elders total, and they had 4 people there. So they're like, this is a little overwhelming. And we're like, well, this is a big issue the way you've presented it to us. But when they were
pick up basketball.
Yeah, well, it keeps people honest. But then when they looked at us and said, we need you to call Elevation Church a bunch of heretics, all of the elders looked at each other and were like, don't make us defend Elevation. But we got their statement of faith right here. They're not heretics. And they were able to see unification, so you can't break into that. Factionalism is easy.
And even if they were, why am I making a statement about another church?
Thank you.
Why am I making a statement about another church in another state?
What are we doing?
They're not down the street. So maybe a different type of this, and this is more like the staff structure at different churches, especially if you're coming into a role where somebody else had a role for a long time. I, in my previous church, stepped in, and the student pastor that was there before me really wasn't there very long, but apparently he was very, very beloved and had a bunch of programs that all took place in the morning. Like, so he would pick up kids and then take them to school, which is a whole other kind of ministry safe issue, but we won't get into that. So when I got there, I kind of pivoted. And so I was going to all of the sporting events and all the recitals and all the different after school programs at the kids' schools. And as a result, I had the office admins griping that I was never showing up to work. And so I had to get at staff meeting, hey, I know there's been some conversations, but I am contracted 40 hours a week. And I am working, 55 or 52 hours most weeks. I am at this event, this event, this event. So just because I am not beating your car into the parking lot on a Tuesday morning when I was out Monday night at a Bible study with college students, that doesn't mean that I'm not doing it. And it took kind of the senior pastor being like, yeah, we don't need you here 9 to 5. But when you have a church office structure that's used to 9 to 5, and then you get rid of office buildings and now you're working remotely, or you kind of come in because there needed to be a change and you're not doing things the way that the previous person did, sometimes you need to let critical voices know, hey, just because it doesn't look like it looked before doesn't mean the job isn't getting done. And in that season, I mean, it sucked having to be like, I've got 3 kids in diapers at home and I'm out 4 nights a week and I'm defending myself to you and you're supposed to be my secretary. That's not how this is supposed to work. But it took a putting my foot down one time, not publicly, but in a meeting with other decision makers there, to be like, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't be talking crap about our pastors who aren't doing things the way that our less effective previous guy used to do it.
We've talked about the three buckets here: helpful, misinformed, and harmful. Let's dive into. We've already done this a little bit, but I want to just kind of slow down and talk about some more. How are we to process each of these different kind of buckets or folders of feedback? Jeff.
Oh, dump it on church members. It's really helpful. And then dump it on your wife. Typically for me, I get defensive first. I think that's probably true across the board. You start to defend yourself. But one thing that I have learned over the years, I mean, obviously, not to sound too overly spiritual, but we are pastors. You need to pray about things. You need to listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit prompting you. So like in the sandals example, there's no way that was just me. That was definitely the Holy Spirit. I was like 20 years old and full of myself and, just thought, initially that was so stupid, really, sandals. And then it was kind of like the thought kind of crossed my mind and my heart, like, I mean, why can't you just wear shoes? It's really not that big of a deal. Like, Jim loves you, the church loves you. They pretty much let you almost do anything you want to do in terms of like music selection and stuff. Nobody is really a grouchy old person here that's holding you back. So like, why wouldn't you just kind of like accommodate this and really not make it a big deal? And so that lesson is one of those lessons that kind of marked the rest of my ministry life. And the last thing, and I think I learned this from your favorite Canadian, Andrew, Carey Nieuwhof. Maybe
I love
not.
him.
I don't know. He did have good advice from time to time. But he or whoever I heard it from just said, when you're feeling that frustration of like everybody's against me, get out a piece of paper and write down the names of the people in your congregation who you actually think are really out to get you or against you. And if you're honest and you really do it prayerfully, you'll notice that list is really short. Most of the times there might be only like a handful of names, if that. And so you really can then kind of like see, look, everybody is not against me. Feedback is just feedback. I think it's really important that you kind of have a strong sense of vision and why you're at the church you're at, because then that helps you to process, am I doing what I was brought here to do? And if you are, you just have to know sitting in the chair of leadership is going to come with criticism. That's just part of the deal.
I think a real simple practice is just asking follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Like, hey, especially because again, most of these conversations are not scheduled. They're kind of out of nowhere. So take a step back and be like, hey, do you know what? I want to take this seriously. Could you give me an example of what you mean? And when you do this, what you're doing is you're saying like, hey, I'm open to hear this and I'm open to changing, but I'm not agreeing to something right away. So, hey, just give me an example of what you're, hey, pastor, you're doing, there's this happening in your sermon, or there's this about the music. When they make kind of bold but ambiguous statements, pause and say, okay, let me think about this. Could you give me some specific examples to think about and reflect on? And you tell the person who you're having the conversation with, hey, I value what you're saying. I'm not disregarding you, but I want receipts before I'm going to really do anything about this.
Or Andrew, you could just do what I'm doing right now, and you just kind of nod slowly, stroke your beard.
I can't grow a beard, Tim. Thanks for rubbing that in.
Make them think that, yeah, this is really soaking in. I'm going to write this down.
Having a beard is a very doctoral thing.
Listen, I spend so much money on Rogaine and Propecia as is. I couldn't put more salve on my face. I'm trying to keep this up top. That's all I got.
That's just some feedback, Andrew. So maybe they're just misinformed, right? Well, that kind of thing.
Example of my beard.
Yeah. Well, see, just like with the feedback, you got the misinformed stuff, and this is the stuff that necessarily people don't understand the whole picture. I like when someone critiques your leadership, but like literally they only know 5% of what's going on, right?
I mean, this is like especially with the worship stuff, and I try to be like a present and like a pastoral and thoughtful like pastor, and I do think sometimes not reacting in the moment and like practicing like this is a dumb conversation phase, and like just like okay, like literally like almost what Tim was saying, like literally like smile and nod, and like hopefully the process of just hearing them out is enough to kind of move this conversation along, but I just try to be gentle, because sometimes in the misinformed bucket, winning that conversation isn't necessarily a win for the conversation, right? Because it is sometimes a silly thing. Like sometimes Jeff is right. If we have a pool of 25 songs, we don't need to do that 26th song that we just want to introduce that's by whatever church that no one likes. we could find another song that maybe no one knows who wrote it, and then therefore that's safe or whatever. But like,
or you can write your own songs.
That's not as easy as people as you think. But you're right. We could write your own song.
Not even Chris Tomlin does that.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, this is art where you have to like practice in the misinformed section. Correction is not always necessary unless it becomes habitual, like habitual misinformed comments. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know this will kind of move us into the harmful section. You know, when I go back to the Satanic Deli thing, I had a moment later on with that same guy where I realized that all of his anger and his critique was coming from a place of pain. And so for him, he talked about a little bit in that letter, but there was a time when that church was 700-800 people and it was thriving, and it was a different time in a different place. And the thing that I realized was that during that time of thriving, he was younger in his life, and his kids, and then even during that era, his grandkids were coming to the church. And then eventually, partly because of hanging on to the way we used to do things, his kids and grandkids no longer came to the church. And so he lived all of his Sundays were an angry, frustrated experience from then on. And I kind of had that moment of realizing, like, honestly, I really wouldn't even wish that on somebody. Like, I'm sad for him now that he has gotten to the place where bitterness has taken such a root that every time he comes to church, the emotion he experiences is anger and frustration. And so his critique was really just him lashing out from a place of pain, of wanting the church to be what it was, which in his mind was, of course, romanticized and glorified, and it probably had problems and stuff, but he was just kind of hearkening back to his golden era in his head. And if we would just go back to doing the things the way we used to do, then we could recapture that golden era, which is just never true because we don't live in that time anymore. And so I think with the harmful feedback, sometimes you have to remember you are a pastor. And you are a pastor to those people who want to maybe hurt you. You know, I mean, it's cheesy, but people have said, you know, the sheep bite sometimes. And you are a pastor to even that person who's going to accuse you of running a satanic deli. And I don't know, you know, I didn't have success there, but you are still called to pastor that person and not some church of your imagination where everybody just likes everything you have to say. That's just not reality. So I think it's helpful for me to remember when sometimes you'll notice when somebody is very emotionally like wants to give harsh feedback about something, if you will stop and listen, you many times will find out that there's some place of pain behind that.
And I think we have to realize this and always know that, you know, it's coming out of the overflow of something.
Yeah.
Because if we always take this harmful feedback, you know, my example of the, you know, more innocuous staff relationship, well, they missed the guy that they used to work with. So that's what the thing was. You always have to realize there's a deeper issue going on. And if you don't have that perspective, then some of this feedback really hurts and it can shorten ministry tenure at the places that God has called you to. And this is where pastors get really, really wounded if we don't handle it well and if we don't have the right tools to process it with.
It's the kind of stuff that sticks with you, and you've got to be really careful because suddenly you can start calling into question, you know, your own calling, or maybe someone's made an inappropriate comment about your family. There was a time when someone literally questioned my wife because she showed up to church and checked in the kids a little bit late on a Sunday. I'm like, you don't understand that my wife has been a single mother every Sunday for 16 years in a row. Like sometimes getting 5 kids up and dressed and out the door on time is not an easy thing. It can be dangerous. You can feel like, man, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can carry this alone. And then it just starts to eat at you.
Yeah, I would leave with one big thought on this one. And this is something I've experienced. I think every pastor who's listened to this, if you've been in ministry 2 minutes, you've gotten this kind of criticism or feedback. And I don't know about you, but I sit in it first most of the time. That's just kind of my default thing as a human. But what I would just encourage you to do is the second you get that, what should pop into your head is filter your criticism through your people, not your pain. I've had stuff going through in my life. And I mean, I've even called Jeff before. I'm like, hey, I'm in a situation. Can you help me out? And he was able to, probe some questions at my situation, help me find out what's going on. Okay, it's harmful, but it helps you get out of your own self with it, because a lot of times we're stuck in it. We think everybody's against us. We think meetings are happening. And what I've come to learn is people don't think about pastors as much as pastors think people think about pastors. So for me, it's important just to realize we need to filter our criticism through your people who you trust, not your own pain.
And I think this leads perfectly to the one of the last things I want us to talk about. Tim, can you share some about how I know we know a lot about some of the really harmful stuff people have said to you, especially in that transition from youth pastor to lead pastor. But could you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Andrew and anybody else
And
of
a
how
friend's a
you've been able
friend
to
forever.
Tell us about how
persevere?
Andrew became your
The
dad.
Lord of them. And a friend will not say never.
I think one of the best ways I've learned to deal with criticism, and this even happened before the transition from youth pastor to senior pastor, but it was just not keeping it bottled up. So for the longest time, Andrew and I, as we were both youth pastors doing ministry together at separate locations, we would routinely after youth group just shoot a text, hey, can we chat? And there would be oftentimes a phone call on the way home from youth group, and it was usually a little bit of a vent session, maybe a gripe session, or just, something's going on that we need to talk about. And typically the way it went was I would tell Andrew something or something that someone said to me, and he would either laugh it off or talk to me and tell me why that's ridiculous or how over the top that was. And what I realized was that I didn't just need someone every now and then to talk to. I needed someone on like a regular basis, like on a weekly basis, like often to chat with, to process with, someone who understood, yep, this is what I'm going through, because he's kind of going through the same stuff. And then when it did come time to actually transition from youth pastor to senior pastor, it was probably daily interactions. There was just so much going on and so much to think through. I needed someone outside of Lakeview context to talk through things with. And Andrew and I were able to develop that friendship. And then we kind of thought, this shouldn't just be us. Like, I'm guessing other pastors feel a little bit lonely on an island. They probably need other pastors to talk to,
especially when you're 15, 20 years younger than anybody else on the staff at the church that you're in.
Right.
Or if you're the only full-time staff member at a church, it's we both kind of came up in in the same big, cool church where we were one of several. And, you knew who you were going to lunch with every day, and you knew who your people were. And then when you feel like you're suddenly on an island, it's like, oh, this is kind of lonely. I get the draw to that other type of church, which thank goodness that different types of church exist. God uses all of them. But the idea of doing ministry alone is not something that we're ever supposed to do. Jesus didn't send the disciples out one by one. He sent them out in groups. Paul did not go on any of his missionary journeys by himself. He always went out with somebody else. We are supposed to do ministry together. And sometimes that looks like being shoulder to shoulder with somebody that's at the same church as you are. And sometimes that looks like, hey, practically pastoring Facebook page. There are 1,200 of us in here. Is anybody else at this specific life stage where I am right now? I need a friend. And boy, is that a useful thing to have. And it's of what we have created here, a couple hundred episodes of podcasts. I think what I'm most proud of is that we have people that reach out like, hey, I connected with this person and my ministry has changed, not so much because of something that you guys said, but because I was able to connect with another pastor in the group that you guys provided for us.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, we don't make any money on our podcast. This is literally like, I schedule and block this time out because I know how important it is for me to be around other pastors.
Yeah.
Ministry is already lonely enough. You don't need to make it worse by carrying everything on your own.
And especially when we have those anonymous posts about the hypercritical church or the church is splitting or whatever it is, absolutely post that for the whole group and the anonymous comments, but make sure you have those 1 or 2 or 5 buddies that are at a similar life stage that you can be like, guys, you have to hear this. And I need some feedback from people that are not impressed with me. Like, I'm not trying to impress you and you don't need anything from me. Like, we can't fire each other. We can't give each other raises. And yet that's how
Tim could fire Frank.
Well, I didn't. That's why I said the 5 of us.
Okay.
But in general,
technically,
finding people that are not impressed by you and do not need anything from you, like, they're not benefiting. We're benefiting from the relationship with each other. But you guys know what I mean? Like, we're not dependent on each other for our vocation or for our salaries. You can be real with those kind of people. And I think that's something that we really need in ministry. And as we say, as the tag of everything we do, don't do ministry alone. Because if you do, whether it's the hurtful feedback or the misinformed feedback, any kind of feedback you get is going to be hurtful if you are in a bubble and you're doing ministry by yourself. But when you have the perspective of colleagues and friends in ministry, it's going to make all of this a lot easier to deal with.
Yeah, if you're not in the Facebook group, come check us out. Go to Facebook and search for Practically Pastoring. The group has like over 1,200 pastors, ministry leaders in it, and it's a great place to bounce ideas and to not do ministry alone. Hey, let's wrap this one of the longer episodes up. I guess we had a lot of feelings about negative feedback. Let's just give like lightning round, really quick thoughts about how to process this feedback. Jeff, can you go first?
Use your iPhone Notes app. So if you get an email or somebody critiques you and you want to respond, don't actually write an email. Just write it in your iPhone Notes and let it stew for a day or two. And then go back and look at it again. And I guarantee you will change some wording and think about things differently than when you're angry. Don't send emails when you're mad.
Filter the feedback. Hey, does this person have the right to give me their opinion? Are they a member? Are they a member in good standing? If this is a person that's shown up for 3 weeks and now they have a word from God for me, okay, but that's not going to affect me the same way that someone that's been a member of my church for 10 years is going to affect me. Filter what kind of feedback it is. Does it line up with scripture? Does it impact my calling? Is it wise counsel? And if it does not meet the criteria of feedback that I need to be listening to, it's going to get filtered out and disregarded.
I would say, seriously, some of the feedback is so crazy. Don't be afraid just to laugh. Maybe not in their face, but it's okay to sit in your office. Well, I mean, maybe something, but it's okay just to sit in your office and be like,
or on a podcast with your buddies.
Yes, this is crazy. And when you're laughing, realize those people may leave. And you know what? It's okay, because we need the seats, because there's somebody who does need to be in your church.
I'd say don't carry it alone. Bring in someone safe, spouse, mentor, friend, another pastor. They're going to help you keep perspective.
Yeah. Not every critic or a criticism should have equal access to you. I think we've been kind of saying that. Like, let the right voices in, shut the wrong voices out.
Taylor Swift just.
I was
like
just
this.
thinking. Didn't Taylor
God.
Swift just say this?
That was her big thing.
That your time or attention is a luxury item. Not everybody can afford it.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Anyways,
You didn't watch the most watched podcast of all time.
I guess
It wasn't
not.
the most watched
Got
podcast of all time.
I mean, we're number one. They're number two. Guard your heart. All right. Hey, sometimes being a pastor means having thick skin and a soft heart, and you're going to get feedback that it's gonna be hurtful or it's gonna be misinformed. And I look forward to the feedback that's actually helpful. But as you are doing this, just remember you are not to do it alone. We will be here next week with another podcast, and we have a Facebook group we would love for you to be a part of. If you need help filtering feedback, make an anonymous post in the Facebook group, and we can let you know if it's a trash feedback or if it's a good feedback. With that being said, we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Peace.